I'm pretty convinced that you cannot buy a decent tasting tomato. There's nothing that beats a homegrown tomato, which is why I've been growing tomatoes in this little patch of my yard every year for the past 12 years. On the other side of this fence, it's big enough for me to fit 5 tomato plants and still have room to walk between them once they get big. Every year in the winter time, this just gets filled with weeds that grow really tall, and so first thing I need to do is just dig up all of those weeds and get them out of here. I spent all morning carefully pulling them all up by their roots, and now I'm raking up all the excess. With most of the leaves and debris swept away, I can start tilling it. I'm just going to start at one end and just start turning the soil over with a spade. If you live in a cold climate, you want to make pretty sure that you're all done with any frost before you plant your tomatoes. So I just work systematically back and forth all the way back. Now I'm just breaking up all of the big clumps with a spade and a rake. I've had years of good tomato yields and I've had years of not so good yields, and I really think most of it comes down to soil preparation, so I spend a lot of time tilling the soil. It's really important to work in some organic material into the soil. If you have access to compost, that's probably your best bet, but I don't have any, so usually I use chicken manure, which I have really good results with. This year I couldn't find any, so I'm going with steer manure. I really like to work this in as much as I can and really try to rake it out nice and smooth. When you buy tomatoes, you can get them in the little 6-packs or the little individual seedlings, but I really think it's worth spending the extra money to get them in these larger pots because they're already fairly established and they seem to have a lot less problems. Worms are good. These usually come out in a big clump. And break this apart. The thing about tomatoes is you want to plant them really deep. You can plant them, halfway up the stem. Some people like to plant tomatoes on their sides to give them stronger roots. I have never really had much luck doing that, so I just plant them straight in, but I plant them deep. I've got 5 different kinds of tomatoes, so I'm going to keep this so I know which is which. I find that those store-bought cone-shaped tomato cages aren't very useful. Once the tomato plant gets too big, they just kind of topple over. So I made these a long time ago. This is just fencing material that I've wrapped around and just tied it together with wire. These work out great. I really like to have my tomato plants far enough apart that I could walk in between them when they get big. They always look kind of limp and lifeless at first, but after a good soaking, they'll perk up. I like to keep them pretty well watered at least the first week every day. If you want, you could put mulch around the plants to help keep the moisture in, keep some weeds out. I have better luck when I just leave the bare soil and don't use mulch. Once the plants get established, I try to water them as little as possible. I think that they really want to grow fruit when they're stressed a little bit. So once they start to get a little limp, that's when I water them. Maybe once a week is all, once they start to really grow. I've tried different methods of watering. I've tried drip irrigation on a timer. I've tried just coming out with a hose and hand watering them. But what seems to work best for me is one of these hose end sprinklers. It doesn't have to be this shape, but one that I just set out there and it slowly waters the plants and doesn't flood them. And I think just the physical act of me going out and doing that works out better. A couple of other things. You want to plant tomatoes where they're going to get the most amount of sun possible. This area is in the northeast part of my yard. It's probably not the best location because there's some shade coming on both locations, but right now it's in the middle of the afternoon and it gets a lot of sunlight. And of course there are just millions of tips and tricks and myths and advice everybody seems to have on growing tomatoes, and I'd like to hear yours too. If you've had some really good success with growing tomatoes, leave comments down below so we can help out some other people. And I'll keep you posted on these throughout the summer. On a good year, I usually get tomatoes all the way through mid-October. Thank you for watching Home and Garden for Mere Mortals, and check the website for lots more information at formeremortals.net.